Hello everyone, so my article today is Skeletal Muscle Characteristics Among Distance Runners, a 20-year follow-up study. So research has shown that both strength and endurance decline among older adults, and this may be due to a reduction in physical activity with advancing age. Most previous studies have been limited to cross-sectional observations, so this article is actually one of the first to do a longitudinal study. Some reports have suggested that muscle fiber composition is altered with aging, with a higher percentage of type 1 muscle fibers being evident in older individuals. And other investigators have also observed a decrease in type 2 fiber size. So the purpose of this study was to describe the interaction between aging and endurance training over a 20-year period. And they specifically wanted to look at the effects of 20 years of sustained endurance training on muscle fiber composition in middle-aged men. And they also examined muscle fiber size and enzyme activity using the subgroup of elite distance runners who have remained highly trained for 20 years. So the design for this study was a 20-year longitudinal analysis. They took 28 male subjects who were selected from a database of previously tested highly trained endurance runners from the late 1960s to about the early 1970s. And they were categorized into three different groups based on their physical activity and training levels. So they were either categorized in the HI group, which were those who continued training for competitive running, the fit group, who continued to exercise but only for physical activity and not training for competition, and the UT group were those who ceased training altogether and those who do not get regular physical activity. So as far as training history goes, information was obtained about each subject regarding physical activity and performance measurements over a 20 to 25 year period. And it was broken up into three different phases. The initial phase, which was intense training from 1966 to about 1972. The interim phase, which was from 1977 to 1987, and then their current physical training status from 1988 to 1993. And it was mentioned that during the initial phase, several of the individuals were actually preparing for national and Olympic competition. And it was also noted that at one point, all of the subjects were highly involved in high volume, high intensity endurance training in the late 1960s and early 1970s. An additional subgroup of 7 elite runners were also examined. An extensive muscle profile was initially obtained and once again repeated in 1993. All were categorized in the HI group, so the data was actually not presented as it paralleled the HI group. For all subjects, an initial testing of VO2 max and body composition was done, as well as a muscle biopsy from the gastrocnemius muscle in the early 1970s and once again in 1993. And they used the needle muscle biopsy technique. A muscle fiber analysis was also conducted in the early 1970s and once again in 1993, and oxidative and glycolytic enzymes were also determined. This chart just shows the physical characteristics of those in each group as well as their training history. So the chart on the left is a breakdown of each individual group's percentage of type 1 muscle fibers. The chart on the right is each individual subject's percentage of type 1 muscle fibers in 1973 when compared to 1993. And in terms of muscle fiber composition and fiber areas, it was found that there is a significant increase in the proportion of type 1 muscle fibers in the fit and UT groups only. As you can see in the chart on the left, there's no significant difference in the HI group. And also the data will show that total mean muscle fiber composition from all groups is significant. So when you take into consideration all of the groups, there was a significant difference. In terms of muscle enzyme activity and capillarization, phosphorylase activity did not differ between the groups. SCH and citrate synthase were higher in the HI group, and the FIT group had higher citrate synthase activity than the UT group. In terms of capillary density and capillary to fiber ratio, it was greater in the HI group, and there were no significant differences in the FIT and UT group. So the FIT and UT groups demonstrated an increase in the proportion of type 1 muscle fibers, and this was seen in about 71% of the total subjects. It was also mentioned that a potential confounding variable is the use of the needle muscle biopsy technique, which is limited by the number of fibers included in each sample. And it has been suggested that the proportion of type 1 muscle fibers is greater with an increasing depth of the muscle. So there may be some error in the obtaining of each sample. And while the data may support that type 1 muscle fiber percentages increase with age, we do have to take into consideration both physical activity throughout the life and or muscle fiber composition in the adolescent and early adulthood years. So that has been my presentation, and I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you.